Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. My name is Doaly and I'm a designer and illustrator. Um, I primarily work for posters and cover art, and I've had a chance to work on everything from movie posters to limited edition prints um, to Marvel comic covers. But today I'll be drawing Ghost Rider, so let's get started on this. So when I start generally drawing a cover or poster, I base everything off of a small thumbnail of my piece to get a composition down. So I'll start off with something like this, which is basically just there to see if the composition works, where I'm going to put type, and this is like the building blocks for the main piece. And I generally draw it at a postage note size piece, because if it works at that size, it'll work when it's blown up to either a cover or a poster. So once I have that in place and I'm happy with composition, I move on to a very loose sketch and start like mapping out what I need to draw. So in this case, we're drawing Ghost Rider, and this is the first time I'm actually drawing Ghost Rider, so it's been a lot of fun working on this piece. So I initially start off with just shapes really. So get simple shapes in like ovals and squares, and just really start mapping out the basis of this character. And it's such a fun character to draw because we've got this very prominent skull. So this is how I start off, and then from there I start adding in a little more detail. Now something like this, when it's like a skull or something you haven't drawn before, it's always great to go back and look at references. So whether you need to troll the internet or buy a model or anything, what I always say to people is, if you haven't seen it, how can you draw it? So do as much research as possible. If you don't know the anatomy of something really well, just go out there, take some photographs, whether it's of yourself or anyone else, and get that detail in there. So once I've got this kind of tighter sort of sketch in place, I start working on further detail and start inking my piece. So that's where we're going to start today. So let's just start a new layer, and then I'm going to just select a black ink brush, and we're going to start drawing Ghost Rider. So let's just zoom in a bit, because the beauty of being able to draw digitally is you can actually zoom into a piece a bit more. So you want to try and make the most of the tools that you have in place. So let's just start drawing in and inking in Ghost Rider. So um, you've got this loose pencil sketch, but you don't have to adhere to it. You can just have fun and start drawing in details that aren't naturally there, and just having fun with it. It's a skull, so it's one of those things. As long as the eye holes and the nose holes and teeth are there, you can pretty much have it however you want. You can make it as sinister as you want, or you can make it as fun as you want. In this case, because it's Ghost Rider, I want that sort of edginess to it. So um, I've made him look a bit more, I guess, meaner than your average sort of skull, which is in this case the fun part of the character. So let's crack on and get going. So I'm just going to ink and start putting the teeth in. And by all means, guys, I'm going to be answering questions throughout while I draw. So post your questions away, and I will try and answer as many as possible. So first thing what I'm going to do, I'm going to just work on my outline, and so we can just map out this central element of our piece. Fun drawing lots of teeth here. Whenever I'm drawing teeth, I always like run my tongue over my teeth just to see like the shape of certain teeth, and from your molars to your incisors and everything else. And it's just like you never really think about these things until you have to draw them. So it's fun just going into the detail of these things of anatomy. Let's get going here. Well, so let's see how this goes. Nice flowy shapes. You want a nice sharp chin. It's nice always working with like having like curved shapes, and then opposing those with very sharp one. Sharp, I can't even talk, I'm sorry. Sharp and bold lines. Let's work on this area. In. Here we are, we're getting there now. Back of the head. Try and get it done in one line, because you get the smoothest line. You can do it in one stroke, which is great. So happy with that. So great. So we've outlined our skull, and so let's just work on the neck. So normally when I'm working, it's I probably deliberate over my lines a little more, but because we're drawing on the clock today, so I'm having fun with it, and I'm not too worried because it's a it's a fun piece and it's a fun sketch that we're producing today. If I was drawing this for a poster or a cover, I'd probably take a little bit more time and deliberate probably over each line, a little more, and then I'd always have like a day or two or weeks sometimes to go back to the piece and finesse it. Um, but that's just the nature of the video today. So we're gonna have fun and draw as as a piece for fun as I would outside of say a project. Let's draw this in and let's go beneath this collar. And so we've got our bone, we've got a elements of our spine. Okay, so we just put a little bit of detail and we're going to be drawing, and we're just putting like while I'm here in this area, I'm just going to put some little detail elements of just like fragments because we're going to be drawing this like volcanic eruption of hellfire. So what we want within that is like these little bits of embers that are floating in the ether. Questions? Let's see. And we've got a question from Twitch, and the question is, okay, my favorite Marvel hero is Spider-Man. What is yours? It would have to be Spider-Man. It's Spider-Man and it's the Incredible Hulk. It's the two characters probably I grew up most watching and reading about, and that's probably because of the animated shows and the live action Hulk TV series. So as a kid, I was probably had more than other heroes had more chances of watching those characters develop. And because being of the age I was, I think most kids identify with Spider-Man. So those two characters from a Marvel point of view are definitely nearest and dearest to me. It's the most I guess I identify with. So what else I'm doing is I wanted to have these sort of like these elements of just shooting up. So in this kind of like this eruption of energy that we have, I want elements which are like being torn away and floating and being shot up. So we're just going in and adding some of these in. The fun part is we can be as tight with our lines as we want because we can always go in and delete and take away from them. So if I just flip my pen over, I can just take away as I have drawn with the same sort of ink pen, just take away from it and start creating these interesting shapes that aren't too blocky because we don't want anything like too perfect squared. We want it to seem quite organic. So we will take away from as we add as well if we feel they're not feeling organic enough. It's like just creating like just lines which are just interesting. You find the shapes interesting and you just creating these like little speed lines. Once you're there, let's just fill them in as well. We'll start adding once we've got our main elements in place. We can start coloring and start adding texture in place as well. So while we do that, we're just gonna etch away as well. I don't want anything too perfect. I want this piece to be more about energy and just pure emotion. So we kind of like the idea behind it when I was drawing it was like let's think of say like a rock album or something like that, something that's very very primal in some ways, and I just want that really high energy about it, that rawness that that'll lend itself to the piece. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So I'm gonna just get this inked as quick as possible, and then start having fun with color. Take away a little, and whenever you like, I end up always zooming in a lot and zooming out just to see how everything is working, and if it's making sense, then great. If not, I can go back and delete certain elements. It's for me. You can just sharpen this element off. There we go. I'm a bit happy with that as it kind of flows a bit better for me. So, okay. So we have so far, we've outlined the skull. So let's go in and start doing some of the detail work and start actually adding character to him. So let's see. So we've got this eye. So a normal skull is quite oval in shape, but this one we're going to add a bit like it's kind of like having a snarl to the eyes. So you're adding character rather than just having it kind of like a generic looking skull. You want to try and add character at this point and make it as interesting as possible. Um, so you can go in and try and add depth to these eye sockets. So this is the bit. It's like you can just really just have fun drawing these lines because there's no real rules behind it. It can be anything you really want it to, and long you've got that base sketch that's like, okay, I'm going to keep it within these realms, and it's like this is the fun stuff I get to do. So just everything else is just like, okay, lines and textures. Let's start. Yeah, that's what we can zoom out. Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's going, and we're going to start carrying on. There we go. So, a little bit there and here. Cool. Let's look at our nose hole. And you don't often get to say stuff like nose hole when you're drawing people. And this is the beauty of drawing someone like Ghost Rider, because it's just a very, in a sense, from drawing a face where you have to worry about lips and nose and everything else, it's like you've simplified your task here because you've got these gaping holes for those areas. So it kind of makes it easier, but it makes it more fun drawing because you're not having to like think as much. Because how often do people see skulls and so forth? So it can be the skull could be any skull you want it to be, shape wise. Right. Right, so we've got our main structure. Let's see everything is. Let's see if everything is sealed or have left any gaps. I haven't left any gaps, which is amazing. So I'm just going to select these areas which we've kind of outlined. Select a layer above it. We're just going to extend our grouping by, let's see, 3. Great. And we're going to fill this in now. There we go. So we're going to combine those two elements together. And now we've got the basis of our skull. But we're not done now. So what we can do is I'm going to flip over to my eraser tool. And I'll move my skull below my base sketch. Now I can see all the detail and start bringing some of these elements in. So let's have a look. So let's see what we want it to do. So the skull is kind of like engulfed in light. So we want to play around and start adding in those lighter elements. And it's kind of like if everyone's played with Scratchboard before, you're kind of just scratching away at the ink now and adding all this detail in, which we've kind of like, okay, we've just blacked over. Take away, like, let's not have edges too perfect. Let's take away from them. Let's make it as interesting as possible. Again, and just like this is just a very clean, simple ink pen. Which works really well for something like this. You like a lot of my work generally has a lot of texture, but this has been really fun to work on because it's just like in a sense so deliberate with its lines. You can just have fun and it's very precise in some ways. But it's just fun, just like keep going in, scratching away at certain elements, making it your own. Our skull's coming into place now. So what you can't see on my other screen is basically just like a lot of skulls and like reference images, so I know like what the bone structure is basically going to be, and then from that bone structure I can always like, okay, how do I make that my own? As long as the main line and elements are there, from an anatomy point of view, the rest is all just fun. So let's draw this like the lining that we have in our skull. There we go. Right, now that's coming in there. Light with this. Now, this is coming into play. So let's see if you've got any questions. Here's a question from Twitch from, sorry if I butcher your name, Shayfei. What are some tips for a person just learning to draw? I started like from a history point of view, my career, I started off as a web designer, and I moved into like user experience design. So my career for 18 years was basically based on apps and based on web development and marketing. And then I started drawing for fun outside of work because I wanted to do something for myself. And I treated it in a sense for fun as a hobby, another creative release that was just for me. But the thing that I learned from it was basically drawing often, and not worrying about how good or how good or great the piece was. I just made sure I finished every piece I ever did, just because if I finished it, then there's something there that I can learn off of. If I never finish something, it's like there's never something that I can say, okay, it got to a certain point, and where were the bits that I can improve the next day. So I'd say draw often and just draw for fun as much as possible. No one's watching your work; it's purely for you. Make it as fun as you want. And I used to draw pretty much every day on my lunch breaks. I used to draw and note down ideas in my little notepad. I used to have like a loads of like post-it notes on my desk, and half of them were scribbles of ideas, which I'd then work on in the evenings when I get home. So yeah, I was just like living and breathing the creative process. Um, so I would draw as much as possible. I mean, I would say elements of it are, in a sense, you're talented to a degree because you see some things a certain way, but the part of drawing is definitely a skill in some ways. So you have to keep you have to keep at it, and you have to keep practicing. Even now, if I don't draw for a week or a couple of weeks, I'm rusty when I get back to my table. So I try to draw, as often as possible, because every day I'm still learning in very much certain ways. And I like to keep myself out of my comfort zone so I can keep on learning. So yeah, my my advice would be just draw as much as you possibly can. So here's a question from YouTube. What's the longest it's ever taken you to draw or work on one illustration? Um, Longest I've ever taken on a piece, when it's just from a drawing point of view and it hasn't got anything to do with like back and forth with clients or what have you or feedback, I would say probably 2 weeks. Not in the sense solid drawing every day, but it's like I generally work on a project or multiple projects throughout my week, so I'm flipping between projects, so I keep myself, motivated and interested, and variety is the spice of life from that point of view. So I would say like generally 2 weeks. It's the most I've ever spent, deliberating and working on a one illustration, because I just keep going back to it every other day and working on it bit by bit. I see something different with it every day, and I want to change it and make it better. Sometimes when you're working on something for a long period of time, you kind of miss details because you're too I guess you're concentrating on the bigger picture, and you're not seeing a lot of the small things. So one of the things I always do is I set my latest illustration as my phone wallpaper, my lock screen. So when I'm away from my desk, I can always refer back to it and see all the like little things I need to fix for the next day. Um, so if you ever see me out in public and just ask to see my phone lock screen, you'll see what is the latest thing I'm actually working on. That generally I can't always show people because it's always top secret. So here we go. We're just adding some details for the teeth at the moment. So I'm just erasing away the ink that we will re put in place and trying to get some of these structures here. Let me just get this little bone in here and just like little bits because it doesn't need to be perfect, and it's nice just breaking up some of this really harsh ink. We just a little bit just scratching elements. Yeah, and we'll do the same now for do the same for our spinal elements now. It's taking away because it's like in a sense from what we've got in this very it's a very light driven piece. Um, these elements which are smaller, they're going to be taken away from a bit more because the kind of the light's encroaching on it a bit more. So we're just going to scratch away and like leave elements a bit more broken in some ways. Right, let's see what else. There we go. In a minute, I'm going to just take away these blue lines and just work off. Okay, once I've got everything in place. So here we go. We got teeth, but once again, they're in the background of this part of the element, so we just want to have like the idea of where it would be. We don't need all that detail. This is where, like, okay, the teeth, and we'll just add that kind of like, it's kind of like the idea of teeth being there. Your mind does half the work for you. You just need to give like the people an idea of what something is and where it should be. You don't have to not always work as hard as an artist to show every little detail. Yeah. Let's get here. Debris elements, and get the details that are just poking through the Hellfire. Right, yeah, we're getting there. Yeah. Okay, so we've got our basis of our skull in place now. So now let's go in there. I'm going to just create another layer on top of this. We can then draw in our jacket element, and we can have it as a separate layer, just so we can play around with them separately if we need to. If we ever need to set, you don't want to draw everything on one layer. I mean, you can, and that's great, but it allows you a bit more freedom later on in the piece, so you can play around with textures and so forth, and you can treat it as its own little thing. Just draw the neck, and it's just kind of like it's disappearing into this area of light. So break that up a bit, and then we've got these great lines of like material. So one of the things I always get asked is like, how do you draw materials? Like, there's certain things that you kind of remember, like, okay, this is how a crease works and so forth. But a lot of the times, like, just like in this case, hey, look up how a leather jacket looks and how it folds and how it kind of behaves in certain areas, like where it's the crease over an arm or anything like that. So when in doubt, just like look it up, or if you can, you're wearing something anyway, just put a jacket on, take a photograph of yourself in the same pose, and you can just see how material behaves. Because it's like there's certain things, like I say, it's like I'd never studied to be an illustrator from that point of view, so I'm like very much learning and still picking up on certain things and references and so forth. So I'm doing like life drawing classes, so I can get better at anatomy, so I know it from without looking at references for everything. So it's always fun just learning and just building new skills. Even when you are working professionally, you're still learning every day from your peers or from from anything. So you always want to keep getting better at what you do. Try and add in like it's nice drawing in like little bits of detail. It's kind of really what makes the piece. So just add in like a zip element and just like softness, this detail. It's like where you basically have light interacting, so you leave that area white. Let's do the same here. Let's just these elements start big and just break it down a bit as you go on a bit further. Let's do the same here. Okay, so let's do the same here, and like the material will have a softer flow from where we're going. So we're getting there. Yeah, the jacket's getting there. Just ruffle this bit as in, closing and it's opening up. And hopefully I have left this so it's all sealed. And I can just select this whole area in a few seconds and just fill it in. So yeah, I've sealed it. That's great. Sometimes it's always like trying to find the gap and filling it. So you can carry on. So great. So we've got that in place. I'm just take away my sketch for a second and just show where we are right now. So very quickly there, we've put in the basis of our main piece here. We've got our, our first part of our inking done. Now we can do what we did basically with the skull and start taking away from our jacket as well and start adding in those elements of detail. So I'll just turn my main sketch on as well so I can just see, certain bits. And let's just start like working on the edges of these elements here. Actually, what I'm going to do, instead of taking away from the jacket like that, I just remembered what we're going to do is probably give that a different color. So what I'm going to do is I've got to turn this on here. Here in my bottom corner is basically my palette. So this is the palette that I've currently chosen for all the different elements of this piece. And it's great there. It's just handy having it. So I can refer back to it at any point and just use my color dropper tool and just pick colors. Because a lot of the times when I work from for like screen printing. And in that case, it's very precise. Like you generally are quite limited in the colors that you use. So you have to find fun ways like combining colors and adding different transparencies and textures that allow you to, like, it feels like there's more colors than there actually are. But that, for that reason, I always have like this palette that I build up before a piece, just so it's there to refer to and everything kind of stays where it needs to. So let's just let me switch up. Here we go. That's where that would be. Let's see. Bit of light there. And let's just work on the shoulder element. Yeah. And then we're gonna probably just do a few like bits of like where the light's hitting on this. Like I want to keep everything in some ways quite dark. I want this very like bold image of the skull and the jacket. That's why I always remember when I think of Ghost Rider, this guy on a bike, and it's just like so powerful as an image. In there, we don't have too many bits, but this where we are on the shoulder, kind of a shoulder strap, I guess. Yeah. We're just adding some of the detail. And like I said, you add in a little bit of the detail in this case, and then your mind will basically connect the dots for you. You don't have to like add too much detail in these small areas, because when you zoom out, it's like, okay, that was a very tiny piece. I didn't need to go like totally to town on it, because you're never going to see some of these things. You just want to give the idea of them where the light hits. Let's see. Okay, you're doing well. I'm going to have a quick look in a second for any if we've had any more questions. Let's see what else we have. Sean Joseph from Facebook. If I were to defeat you in one-on-one combat, would I gain your powers? Yeah. Why not? I mean, if you beat me in one-on-one combat, by all means, take what you want. I just generally don't get asked that question, so that's an interesting one. But yeah, I think that's how it works. It's just, go for it. Yeah. I'm a bit apprehensive now because I've never had that question, so I'll be looking over my shoulder from now on for you, Sean. Yeah, that's just right. You catch up with itself. Here we go. So let's add this in. Let's add a little button here. Just where the light would hit it. Right. Anyway, so next thing, real fun thing to draw is spikes. So we've got here we go. We've got our lights. So I'm gonna take away our sketch just to quickly show you where we are. So we just added some light elements onto our jacket. And now we can draw in our spikes. Once again, another like fun element to Ghost Rider. You've got the Hellfire Chain, and you get these spikes that protrude from his jacket, or elements of his bike and so forth. So these elements like this are always fun to draw. I'm just going to name my layers so I know exactly what things are. Even though I'm just working on this for myself, it's nice to have those little niceties, because you never know if someone's ever going to pick up one of your files. So it's nice to have everything in a nice order. So let's just draw that little curve, and then I'm going to just select here, and we can draw our spike. So there we go. There's spike number one. Let's actually, we can do this very quickly. So let's draw this nice like sweeping oval. Try and do it in one stroke, because then it'll definitely be a cleaner line. And then we can just draw points on these. Great. So we've got that. So, and I draw a little bit too fast for the computer to catch up. There we go. So let's try next. So this is nice, because it's like when you crop over like certain details, it makes it feel a bit more natural, and not everything's trying to be perfect that you can see every line. You want to have like different elements interact with each other, and it kind of gives you this element of like this 3D approach to it, because everything's going to be sitting by itself all very neatly. So let's get these in, and then we've got our spikes, and there we go. We've got one there, and I'm thinking that would probably be better kind of from behind or over his shoulder. So let's add a spike in here, right there. So let's color that in. Great. So we've got a few spikes now. So I'm going to just label that layer spikes, so I don't forget. I'll label this one behind it spike, just to know what I'm working with. As we start building up this piece, at the moment it's very simple in what it is. There's only a few layers, but pieces very easily become 20, 30 to a couple of hundred layers. So for that purposes, I try and name everything and group everything, so it just makes my life a whole lot easier as I'm building up the piece. We've got our spikes, so let's go back to black. And let's start adding a bit of detail to these spikes. So I'm just going to go in with this. Stroking line. So let's go back. Following my. So you want to try and follow this curve, and you can draw there's different ways of drawing like chrome and so forth. I could very easily just go like straight lines, but I'm trying to keep in character with what I've drawn previously, like with the skull. So I will just follow this very back and forth kind of strokes, which kind of follow this main curve of the base of our spike. And just fill that in. So there we go. And I can just go ink through the middle because I just want everything to join up. All the way to the tip, basically. So it's starting adding a little bit more dimension to what we have in our way of spikes. It makes it easier. You can just follow a very thin line down first, and then start writing these in. See if you've got another question. Let's see. Here we go. We've got a question from Twitch, and it's from Nathan in the UK. What's your favorite or most interesting superhero to draw? I would say my favorite, it's probably very easily, it is Spider-Man. It's probably the hero I've drawn the most over the over the years, and he's always fun. There's so many stories to be told for Spider-Man, so he's the most fun because there's different ways to draw him, and there's everyone within the Spider-Verse to draw, all the different variations of Spider-Man, and other characters which have his similar powers now. So he's my favorite, I would say. It's always fun. I think it goes from being a childhood and just getting that webbing onto the red suit. That's always just it's always a pinch myself moment. It's oh great, I get to call drawing Spider-Man a job. So yeah, he's always fun. Interesting wise, in a sense, from just from the process of drawing, I would say at the moment I would say it's probably Ghost Rider, just because it's the first time I'm really drawing him. So it's okay, I'm trying to make you want to try and be respectful of the source material that's come before him, the people that have created this character, but then you want to try and make him your own as well in how you're drawing and what fits your style of drawing. So at the moment, yeah, Ghost Rider. I mean, this is the first time I'm drawing him proper outside of just little doodles here or there. So I would definitely want to be drawing more of this character because it's a lot of fun to draw. Yeah, the angle. There we go. So let's just make sure we're carrying on through these same curves. We're going to try and keep that kind of flow and motion. Make sure they're carrying on that curve. Just zoom out if you're not sure. If you're too close to the detail, just zoom out and just see how it works in your overall piece. If you're happy for it, just carry on. There we go. We're almost a bit done with our spikes and so forth. We'll add probably a bit more detail in here. Probably another stroke of just texture. So it's not just, I don't know, just add a bit more texture to it, something interesting. Let's see. So now we'll just get that motion, get to the point, and let's add our strokes. Make sure they follow that curve. Right, so those parts are done. I'm just gonna go down to my other spike, add another layer just above this one. Just do what we've basically been doing there and just make it here. I'm just curve. There you go. I can like change the orientation of my canvas, which kind of makes it life easier. So you know, if this was a real world event, I would just turn my paper, just so you know my hands not having to, or my arms not having to reach over. But it's not too bad, and it's like I just want to try and keep everything in the view hole for everyone, just so you kind of see what's happening. I don't want to disorientate everyone by flipping angle of my paper. But otherwise, yeah, if you find an angle, whatever you find most comfortable for your hand, flip the paper in that orientation, and your line work will be a lot smoother for that. Great. So let's take away this. Great. So we've got our spikes in, and I'm liking them. They're very raw in style in what they are. We're going to go in again, and we're going to add a different texture to that. I'm just going to select a different brush. Let's go with, here we go. Let's see how this looks. There we go. So I'm just adding basically a halftone pattern in here. And one of the things is like it's a little nod to comic books and that tradition of halftone patterns to add texture. When you couldn't do print in many colors as you can today. But also it's a nice style element as well, which is really I think from a design point of view come back in vogue in a sense. So it's nice using that as part of it, and he adds add this really nice texture onto our spikes. Let me just save that, add that layer, and click it. And we'll just do the same again on our spike here. Just a bit too much. I just want it on the edge there. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clip those layers so they basically stay and surround that spike. So it's kind of like painting within the line. So now everything on that layer would adhere to that base element, which is the spike. So everything sits in one place. Great. So I'm just going to start grouping some of these elements together. So it kind of neatens up my layers palette. Okay. So now where are we? So I'm just going to turn on my sketch layer again just to see, okay, we've got our base in place. We're going to move on to start drawing the Hellfire in a few minutes. I'm just going to double check my layer here, and I'm going to duplicate my skull because we're going to do something interesting with it shortly. So I'm going to select this main one, and I'm going to change my brush. Let's just change my brush quickly. I'm going to select this kind of very soft, airbrush type brush. I brush a lot. And let's just knock its opacity down a little. And I'm going to change and add a texture to it as well. So now what we're going to do is we've got our base skull here, and the way kind of the heat's interacting with it, I want to have some elements that are glowing and not so solid. So we're just going to try see what works. So we're taking away from my ink again. So here I'm going to just do some of these elements as well, and it just adds a bit of texture to what we've got. Now everything needs to be solid that way. So it's kind of like we're adding elements that glow now. So that's what we're taking away from here. So within this eyeball area here, we have this glowy element, and the same for our nose. Yeah, it'll be glowing a little, and possibly here by the jaw, where we're interacting with the element a bit more. So let's just do that, and we'll probably do a little bit here, just by happy with that bit. And let's just do it here because this is where we kind of we want to separate the spine from the jacket. So this is a great place to do it. So we can just add that, and we'll just do a bit more here on the jaw because we got this heat kind of rising, so it's kind of interacting with the bottom of the jawline. So let's just add this bit of texture in place. Let's just do a bit there. Right, right. Yeah, happy with that. Yeah, that's going away. So that's our ink done on that. So here's our base color. So what I did over here I duplicated that layer of inking. So what I'm going to do with this one now, I'm going to select a color. So I'm going to select this orange. Yeah, select that. So we've got our two elements to our skull. We've got this orange version of it now, which everything we drew so far, and we've got this the overlay on that, which is now with this kind of texture and glow, which I've taken away, but because we've got this base level, it kind of pops through and gives us an extra dimension to our piece. So, yeah, select that. So that's all, like a lot of our dark elements done. So now let's check our skull, and now we get to like start getting to the fun bit, which is drawing all the hellfire. So let's just select here. I'm going to select our base color for this. And let's just draw this. Like, this was one of the main things I wanted to draw when I was drawing Ghost Rider. It's like, what's the most interesting way I can draw the hellfire. So this is kind of what came to mind, like this massive like eruption, like the volcanic sort of eruption that we have. It's very stark, like a very graphical shape. So I wanted that's what I wanted my my version of Ghost Rider to be. It's quite graphic from a graphic design point of view. So let's do that. And let's I'm gonna try and make that a bit, taper that a little. So I'm just take it away just from there. There you go. So we'll get rid of our sketch. Yeah, that's our spikes. That is our spikes. So that's me not naming my layers correctly. Let's get rid of that. So here we go. So very quickly, like you can see, this is the base of our Ghost Rider piece. And now we can start actually having a lot of fun and just being a lot freer with our brushwork, and just how do we want to draw this? How do we carry on and add detail to it? And there's different ways of doing it, and we're going to try a few methods out for the rest of the video. I'm gonna go back to my brush and make sure I've got the brush that I need. So I'm gonna go back to my original, like the smooth inking brush, and then start drawing in some like elements of detail. So we're just gonna have these lines, and I'm gonna stop add elements of like, it's not, I don't want it to be a perfect line. I want to take away, like we did with the skull, I want to add and take away from this main block that we have. So just very freely, just drawing in bits of light and elements. And you just want it to flow. You want it to have a sort of very free, like organicness to it. So not straight lines necessarily. It's not. You want it to have a bit of a curve. Have things feel natural. Just let the brush flow easily. And if you find you end up drawing too much, it's very easy. You can just in the same way what we've done already, we can start taking away from it. And so let's just have a slightly larger brush and just taking away a few elements. Just where you build it up more, you can just take it away in the same way, and it give you a chance of like creating some more interesting shapes by actually taking away rather than adding. But let's just we'll take a few more away from here, and we'll just break it up a little bit, just so it's not pure. Just it's these little details which kind of give you the idea of this massive shape. So you need something to oppose it with. So in this case, these elements that we're taking away fire from the flame, it kind of adds more to what you do have. There's a contrasting element to it. Yeah, that's the edging done. I'm kind of happy with that as an edge. Feels a bit more natural. And let's just add in a bit more here. Just a few like stray little lines. I don't want it being too perfect. I just want it to feel natural as it breaks away. There we go. There we go. Let's see if we've got any questions while I carry on. Here we got a question from Twitch. It's from Mars. Do you ever play music as I draw, or does the silence help you more? No, generally when I'm drawing, I always have music or a podcast playing. It's for me, it's very hard to draw in silence, just because I'm naturally used to having people around me, like in an office environment. So to make up for that, because I'm drawing from my home studio. I have music playing, or I have a film playing. Depending on what I'm working on. If it's for a movie, then I generally have like the soundtrack playing occasionally. But yeah, generally there's always something going on. I find it weird or just like not natural. Drawing in complete silence. So yeah, there's generally always something going on. Thicker here. There we go. Just want some thicker elements. Everything's gone like a bit too thin, so let's have elements kind of like that, have released from the main body, and are working independently. So once you got them, you can just take away from them and just make them natural. Okay. And it's like, what this reminds me is like, say if you had ink or paint, and you just poured it on a canvas, and then you either had like a straw or something, and you just blew the ink, so it kind of creates as much of a natural shape as possible. You don't want to worry about it like being super precise. You can go in like if I was doing this for a cover job and I had days to weeks to do it, then I could go in and start going in and just like drawing everyone and doing everyone very precisely, like drawing all like little lines that come from it, and take a bit more time. But when you work, you want to produce something within an hour or so, you allow yourself a few more freedoms from that point of view. Here we are, we're getting this. We are flames coming in place. So now we've got, I'm happy with this as a flame. So I'm going to just select a layer on top of this and start adding some texture and some depth to this. So first thing we're going to do, let's select our orange. I'm going to select, it's kind of soft airbrush tool, and like add some depth. So, it's all bubbling up from beneath, and we're going to try and add that sort of like texture and so forth here. So start adding these elements. So we've got this orange that's behind him, so we're going to try and put that back in there. Yeah, well, I'm also looking at my second screen, so it's just seeing it at a different angle, just to see what it looks like. It just helps seeing it, from a different point of view occasionally, just to see how everything's working. So yeah, let's just get happy with that. So I'm just knock the opacity down of that slightly. There we go, and I'm just add a slight bit of texture to it. Flatten that texture. Great. So we've got that. So we've started adding a bit more depth to it, and let's carry on and add a little more to what we have. So I'm gonna go in here. So I'm thinking like he's where the center of our flame is. If you look at a flame, the center is always the lightest, and as you go out, you get more colors between orange and yellow and orange. So the centerpiece, you want to make it, as bright as possible. So in this case, I kind of see emitting from his skull itself. So we'll go in there. I'm going to add some lighter elements. So we can go in with basically, which is white in this case. I have this phase, and it's like, what I'm going to do is just, so I don't kind of go outside of my lines in this case. So let's just do this, because that's actually looking better being all white in those areas. And then where his mouth is now, this is where we kind of like we'll build it in slowly a little bit. There, great. And I'm just going to select two, and we just take away from it just slightly, just in certain areas, just a little there. I don't need any there. I don't think when it coming from his mouth. So let's take a bit there. I think that's fine. Just zoom out a bit. Let's see how it's looking. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So we shall actually. I'm just going to add a bit of texture to that. Here we go. Just a little texture. Keep everything, somewhat textured in the piece, even though it's like quite solid inks. But it just helps that sort of like, that organic feel of the piece. So we've got, so very quickly building this up. Let's add the element. So another thing I want to do is kind of add smoke elements to this piece. Let's go back in and select our ink brush. Let's select the cream that we used already on the jacket. Before I start on the next bit, let's just see if there's another question here. Okay, we got a question from Twitch and Nero. Hey, what software are you using for drawing? This is Photoshop. So I know a lot of like Photoshop's a very versatile tool in what it is. So you kind of use it for, whether it's photo manipulation, whether it's layout, whether it's graphic design. I use it for drawing, and it has a great, suite of material like brushes and so forth, which are very big, that very organic feel, like from a traditional sense point of view, from a traditional art point of view. So that's what I generally use. So I use like majority of the brushes I use are like just stock brushes that come with Photoshop, and I've tweaked them over the years to make them my own. And then there's various artists that have created brushes for Photoshop that are also bundled with Photoshop. So you can use those, and they're great because, like I said, they give you that traditional feel of the media that you're after. So in this case, this is a inking brush. So if I was just to show you an ink, if I just do it, it has it tapers off as you apply extra pressure or less pressure, and it slightly has a bit of transparency towards the edge. So it has that natural feel, like say if you had your brush and you moved it across a piece of paper, but you had less pressure and more pressure in the center. It kind of gives you that feel. So it feels as natural as possible, because you always want to, like, for myself, I want to try and keep the work as feeling as natural as possible. So it's that element of, when I flip between, let's say, in a sense, digital or traditional. I want to try and keep, the skill set the same. I don't want to like kind of relearn each time I start a new piece. So this definitely makes it easier. There's like a lot of people think sometimes when you're working digitally, there's an awful amount of shortcuts, or the program does the work for you. And yes, I mean, there's elements that it does speed up your workflow, but as you can see today, like pretty much everything is a line that I've drawn physically, apart from, like, say, filling in the inks, which is of course a godsend, I guess. When you're working digitally, you can do that very quickly. But everything else is like all the lines I've created by just traditional means. So that's what I'm using today. So now what I'm just doing, so I'm just adding like little smoke elements, because I was just thinking, like, there's the hell flame, in sense, from Ghost Rider point of view. It's not necessarily, it's not, it can be cool to the touch. So I just want these elements of smoke. So there's just another dimension to what I'm drawing, this cooling effect. So I'm just like drawing this one line like very faintly and just breaking up a bit, and then going in certain parts and just making it thicker, because smoke is a very interesting thing to draw, and it's very natural, very organic shape. It's got this great flow to it, and some parts are thin, some bits are thick. It has a mind of its own in that sense, the shape. So you just want to go in and just like, okay, some bits are going to be thicker and thinner, and just add to it, and just keep it as, I guess, feeling as organic and less blocky. I mean, a lot of it's to do with the style that you want to go for, but I try and just like keep my basically my hand going as loose as possible, so it the actual artwork feels natural as possible. Yeah, not tensing up, and just having fun with it, having fun with it. And I guess that just comes with practice, to be honest. So very easy to learn that. There you go. Let's add a bit more. Let's okay. Let's just do the eye sockets. So the center. So I'm curving the, like you can see here, I'm curving the bottom of this smoke, so it kind of feels like it's wrapping around and coming from inside. It's building up. So let's do these lines in. And then once we have this kind of base element, then we can decide on, okay, what's going to be the line that kind of flows all the way up, and how long is it going to be, and so forth. So let's just make it as interesting. There you go. I went a little too sharp there in that curve. It wouldn't behave in that way. I don't think it will anyway. There's no right angles in smoke. So let's just go in and bring these. Go in from the base and extend from there and draw these lines, similar to what we did with the spikes earlier on. It's the same method, so it's the same few methods of drawing that we're using um, throughout for the different elements, and that kind of like ties the whole piece together. Unless you want your piece to look like it's mixed medium, you want to keep that consistency throughout. It just makes it easier. I mean, it's some pieces I like to draw, and I use like I'll have some elements that look like they're done in oil paints, and some are ink, and that very much depending on the piece and the subject matter, can very much lend itself to it. But in this case, the piece that I have in my mind, I want to try and keep it all as uniform as possible with the different brushes. I'm not trying to use too many. Here we go. So we've got that. So we're just going to do a bit here. Right. So we're getting that. That's better. That's better. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to do just a kind of little like a breakaway element just from the main bit, just so it stays interesting. I don't want each line to necessarily each like plume of smoke to look like the last one I drew. I want them to be from the same family, but I want them to be interesting in themselves. So let's add a bit of uniqueness there of how it's interacting. So we've got it there. Where else should we go? Nose possibly. Let's have some coming from below his chin. So that's easier to draw it coming down from that angle. There we go. Let's do the same here. And just coming from beneath his chin. Just like adding interesting elements where you can see and just block out some area. Just makes the whole piece a bit more interesting, especially when like elements interact with each other. So you've got this little element of smoke, but it's wrapping around in a sense, and it's like overlaying on top of this like very harsh skull shape, so it helps break that up. And it's also interacting between these orange and yellow elements. So you get this great contrast. So you want to kind of like not break the rules, but you want to have these areas, so it's not separate colors behaving by themselves. You want to have them interacting with each other. You get these great textures from that, and you kind of when you zoomed out, it kind of looks like you've got a third color because where they overlap and play with each other. Let's do the same here. Let's do our skull. Let's see. Looking if we've got any questions. So I'm going to refer back to the questions in a bit. I'm just going to finish this one element here, and then we'll go and see if we've got any more questions. I'm sure we do. So let's see how much further do we bring this in. Let's see. Low out there. There we go. So I was thinking like the base of the spine's got like a lot of energy coming from it, and so we want this because it's like the base of human skeleton, so it's like everything's wrapped or comes from the spine. So we just want this to be part of our piece. So let's just bring it back in, and this plume of smoke helps us do that very easily. Here we go. I'm gonna grab a question. Have a look. Here we go. We got a question from Twitch. From Angie. Which superhero powers would you want? Okay, superhero powers. Every day, what would be useful for me? Let's have a think. Again, you get this question, and I guess flight would be a really cool one to have, but it's like I work from home studios, so it's like I'm not leaving the house, especially not in current circumstances. So it's not going to be very useful for my daily life. So what other powers would be useful? I don't know. I'd love to be able to like have an idea and be able to like see it come to fruition in front of me in a sense like, oh, here's an idea for a piece, and this is what it's going to look like. It'd make my life in a sense easier in some ways to know that okay, this is what it will look like, and not having that moment of like I would say to a lot of people when you're drawing a piece, the initial 50 to like 75% is still you playing some guesswork. Is it going to come together? And it's always that last 10% when it really does. In between then it's like, will it work, won't it work? That last 10% makes this massive difference. Just to know that it's going in the right direction beforehand would be great. I guess that takes a lot of the fun out the process, because it is fun to work things out as you draw them. A loose sketch is great, but there's no reason why you have to adhere to it 100%. If it's not working out as you thought it would, then just scrap it, move on, change what you need to. feel like you have the freedom to do that. So yeah, that's my superpower, but I'm not sure I'd end up using it that much, so I might have to think of a new one. Right, so let's see. So let's just think from a balance point of view, where let's add another one into like the back of his head. So back of his head, just because it's not like, yeah, that's going to be there. And then just a bit more detail. Right, I just had a quick look. Let's see how we're doing. How seeing where we're going. Okay. Right. Let's finish that up. Right. So we've got that. We've got our smoke. I'm going to call that smoke. And I don't think we need to play around with that anymore. So now let's go back to our Hellfire. So we've got these elements here. Now we can start drawing basically the Hellfire Chains, which is a big part of Ghost Rider. So let me just select a layer, create a new layer. We're going to select a color. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can draw chains and so forth. Lots of different methods. And it just depends on, I guess, one time, how much detail you want to put into your chains and so on. So let me just flip through here very quickly. And let's go back, just move my layers. Okay, so I'm happy with, yeah, layer positioning. So I've got everything in folders, so it's easier to play around with. So creating a chain. So I'm just going to turn on my sketch for a second. So easy way of doing it is, okay, you've got loops and you've got connecting elements and you've got loops. So that's a great way of doing it. And you'll create, a very easy, in a sense, chain. And you can have some, you can make it interesting. You can delete, just select a different brush quickly, like we did, just to make it interesting. You can just delete and take away from there at the same time as well. So it's not necessarily, you don't want to make it too uniform. You have interesting elements within your chain. So this is one way of doing it. And you can play with the shapes. I mean, they can be very uniform in what they are. They can be, angular. In this case, this piece for the size that we're drawing, this particular one, you don't have to worry too much. You can even like start turning stuff on an angle. It's like I want basically chains to be the extension of this Hellfire. So it's just adding in like a story element, an element of the character, which is part of the bigger piece, which is always like the fun thing when you're designing a piece. It's like how can I like distill as much of this character and story elements into one piece. So I'm not drawing like, say, multiple characters, multiple scenes. I can try and fit all those story elements and overlay them so they work within one piece at one time. So wait, I'm just going to quickly draw this, and it's going to be a big part of our main sort of like Hellfire here. As it comes in, there we go. So we're adding another texture, another element to our flames, and it just makes it a bit more interesting for the eye. You can do the same here, and it's just like a whisper of it. In a sense, you get a hint that it's there, so it's in places that you see it clearly, and it's places that kind of just build up the texture of the main thing, and it's that element of like storytelling in what you're doing. So it's like, oh, okay. So it's not just where I see, it's in elements where I don't necessarily see everything. So that's a very quick way of doing it. And like I said, we can then select our eraser tool, and we can take away from some of these elements. We can add a bit of shine if we want. It's like within this piece, and that's very fun. It just breaks it up a bit more. It adds a bit more texture in what this piece is very much about. So not everything's perfect. It doesn't need to be. We can even like there's flames going through it, so we can just cut away like we were before. There we go. It becomes natural looking and not too blocky within our piece. So that's one way of doing it. So another way we can do it and add just probably a bit more interesting elements. I'll show you in a minute what I'm going to do actually now. Probably add, here we go. Let's select the right bit. Here we go. We're going to start adding some extra flames. So I selected my orange. There we go. Stay within there. Okay, so like we did before, we're gonna add some flame elements. So and we just want it quite uniform. Actually, one thing to think about is this cone element that we have, so we want to have everything kind of work towards the center. So you kind of keep that flow, so everything kind of works in one sort of like direction. You can break that, but in this case, we don't need to. We want it to flow and become part of this central mass. Some lines are going to be thicker than others. We want it to flow all the way down. Some are going to be thinner. Thicker lines. There we go. Okay, more questions come through, so I'm going to read them in a few seconds. I'm just going to try and make some good headway here. So once again, we've added in some of these orange flames, but once again, we're gonna take away from we don't too perfect. We want to have these like very natural, distinct shapes. So in the same way, I'm cutting through some of these now to create some more interesting shapes. And when we're on the outskirts, I'm going to take away from a bit more, so you get these very like thin slithers. When you're doing it this way, it's like normally, like say if I had to draw this shape in a sense from what I'm not taking, it would be harder for me to create that. But now that I'm taking away from the ink, I can create these very irregular but very natural shapes, which would be harder to draw straight off the bat. It's an interesting way of just like creating and taking away from what you've already drawn. Just this center bit, we don't want too much ink here. We just want it more on the outskirts. Where it feels like there's too much, I'm just take away from it. Okay, that feels a bit more natural. That feels the amount that I want. So let's take our sketch away so you see what we're working with. Just break. Now add in a couple of just thick bits, just so there's something that's not as uniform. Some of these I'll add a bit more to. Just make them interesting. So not everything's the same. Same kind of like the same sort of like idea that we did with our smoke. We're just gonna have a few elements which are like you can kind of see they're billowing up. So there's the thicker body elements they stem from. So we'll just create a few of these here, and they're coming from within. This kind of the jacket. Yeah, don't mind that there. A little bit of this through there. Right. That a bit too much. Okay. Right. So we've got that. We've got that in place. We're happy with that. Let's add a bit more depth. So I've got this lovely like glow that we've got in the center. So I'm going to add something new here and just see what we have layer wise. There we go. That's a new layer for me. Let's select our yellow again. So the other way I was going to say we can draw chains. I've created a brush previously. So some of the fun in Photoshop is you can create your own brushes. So I've created this brush that you can see here, which is basically just like a link, which is part of our chain. So I'm going to select that and like just create elements. So I'm going to just move in and over here. There we go. So I'm going to spread this away. So you can see over here, this is my chain, and I'm going to angle it because we don't want like a perfect line to it. So we can add different angles to it. You can see differently because we don't want like everything to be too uniform. You want to have different elements within that. So we'll just do this, and this kind of gives us this our like light center to our Hellfire, which once again just makes the piece just more interesting. We're layering up textures with our line work. gives us a more interesting piece. So let's change them. There we go. Once we have that, we'll just go back to, there we go. Change angles. We'll just go back to our smooth brush and we'll just draw the links in between. So we do it again. Links, and we'll probably have two transparencies there. So just blend the two together again. And there we go. So we can drop that below those flames. So above and just see where that works. What we'll do now is, now we've got that, we're going to just take away from them just slightly. We don't want them like completely. There's the flames that are interacting with it. So like we did before, we're just going to take away. We don't want anything just like it's been placed there too perfectly. So it's given us a nice little, like, different element without center. It's added a bit more light, and just, contrast again. Let me just quickly pop back to the questions. Oh, here's from Twitch and Captain Chris. How did you start working on Marvel? So when I started drawing years ago, I was drawing for fun, and I kept just sharing my work online for the most part. And then after a while, you start working and you start getting better in what you're doing. And I guess it was when my work kept getting reblogged or shared on like design sites. I guess people were liking what I was doing. So from there, it was like, I guess the right people saw it. And that's how, that's generally how, it works. But I guess social media is one of the great things about it is, you can interact with people generally you'd never have access to. So I tagged my work, the right people saw it, working with, different companies and agencies. And yeah, finally got to that point where, one of my first official Marvel jobs was for Guardians of the Galaxy. I did a poster as part of an art collective. And James Gunn saw it, and he retweeted it, sent me a message later on, and then very quickly after that, the agency that I did it through got talking to Marvel, and it became the limited edition print that came with the deluxe LP soundtrack for that film. So that was the piece I showed like right at the beginning of our video. So that's, so from that point of view, that's a very near and dear piece for me because it's like my first official Marvel piece, and I kind of like started everything off. So yeah, just like drawing, getting better at what I was doing, sharing my work, making sure my work was seen, tagging the right people, using the right hashtags, and a little bit of luck within that. But yeah, that's pretty much it, and that was many years ago now. So here we go. We've got this another. Let's see. Swap our brush again. So there's another shape here. So I'm going to now link it together. So add to it. We're going to put this in place. So this is another, we're doing what we did in that base element. So let's start bringing this in. Right. So we've got this thick chain here. So let's make it a bit more interesting. Because this is like a larger one. You're seeing a lot more of it. So here, in a sense, let's break this link up because it's like it's snapped in places. So do that, and it's like create like little shards of metal coming from it because we don't want it to be perfect. We just want it as interesting as possible. So we'll pick particular points where it's like, okay, it's coming undone, and where it's coming undone, we just want to have it so it's come away, and you can see elements of our chain. You normally wouldn't. So let's just add a bit of like curvature in here and just take away at a few more points, which kind of look most natural to take away from. There we go. Normally it's like in this space, it's fun drawing these kind of elements because you can really make them your own. when you're drawing for speed, you very quickly start reusing some elements because it just makes efficiency. I'm just going to give it a color note, and then I'm going to duplicate it, add a color to it. In this case, our orange. We're going to pick it up and we're going to flip it, and then we're going to bring it over here. And just so it doesn't look too uniform in what we've done, we'll make this, in this particular case, we'll make it larger, and have this chain over here because we need a bit of texture and something different going on this side. So I think this will work quite well. Here's another chain. So we've drawn a couple of chains now. We've done the whole chain by itself. We've used a brush for some elements. So another way of doing that, layer. So another brush that I created, and we're going to draw it in orange, is I've drawn previously just entire chain. So what we're going to do is we're going to fit this here, and we're going to move this and make it as part of our Hellfire. This is another way. So when you've got elements which you might not necessarily see throughout your whole piece, you can play around with it and just create your own brush. So you spend the time initially to draw, create your brush, but then it gives you efficiencies later on in time. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's in my case, I'm very much into, okay, what's my final aesthetic going to be for my piece? So it's more a case of, okay, what does it look like? How do I need to get there? And the process is just part of that. Let's just see, let's get our angles right. So it kind of flows with everything. Doesn't look too unnatural for it. Let's move this a bit over. Let's move this over, and we're going to duplicate this because it's a little short. So we'll just attach it. So that's the thing, you can just attach it to itself. And even if it doesn't fully touch, that's fine. And once again, like we did before, we're going to just take away from some elements. We don't want it too perfect. It's interacting with our main flame element. So we'll just take away as well. So we're getting there. So it's just about making it as interesting, as fun as possible as a shape. So we've gotten that far. So we're going to now introduce probably another element of how we want our flames to look. So let's just take a new layer. I'm just going to move this over, and here we go. Let's turn this off now. We don't want to turn that off. We're going to work on top of that. So let's turn these flames off for a second, just so we can see what we're working on. So now that we've done that, let's go back to our standard inking brush, because we don't need any more chains at this point. So we're going to do some big fat flowy lines now, just because we've done lots of thin ones. So let's add another texture to what we've done. Here we go. And where we don't want it to interact, we'll just cut that away. Right. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to knock the transparency down, and we're going to also cut through it as well, just like we did before. We want at least the edges to feel like they're frayed, part of this main piece. So we'll do that. And the other thing we're going to do is I'm going to just add a layer mask to it, and we're going to take away, we don't want it as bright at the top. I'll just take away from there. There we go. Probably just a little less. There you go. We just want it at the top, just to be a little less of it. And once again, you can interact with your mask a little, and you can actually draw little bits back into it. And there you go, you've got extra texture within your flame as well. Right. So done that. Now we'll put that in. Now you can see very quickly we've built up these different layers of our flame, and it's interacting together. Not everything is uniform. Everything's working naturally together. So we're going to bring in one more element of the character for this particular piece. So I'm going to go back to my sketch, and I'm going to turn on a layer I had hidden before. I'm just going to bring in hand elements. So one of the things, with Ghost Rider, he's our anti-hero. So one of the things I wanted to draw as part of the piece and just show a bit more of the characters is this whole idea of the Hellfire and like the evildoers, in a sense that he's dispense justice to, why he's penance day or and so on. So I wanted to have them as part of the flame, like reaching out, these evil figures. So let's draw these in. So I'm going to turn off some of these other layers just so I can see a little better. Go back down. Let's turn off the orange. There you go. I can see a little better now. We don't do that. I'm going to turn that one off again. There we go. So, there we go. You can find my layer again. Here we are. So drawing these hands. So hands can be, so I know a lot of people that hate drawing hands, and it's like one of the things I like drawing hands when I'm, really get to take my time and, have fun, like little details with them. So, but yeah, to get the overall like shape and dimensions, like what a lot of the times what I end up doing is I'll take a photograph of my hand in the pose that I need it, and then use it as a basis for what the final piece will end up being. So these are based on basically my hands, and I've like earlier today I just like took a photograph with my phone, used that as a basis. Okay, this is what this is the pose I want. I want to like look semi like zombie-esque, and here's like elements that I'm missing. So we'll just draw some bone there instead, and just find interesting shapes. And then once you have that interesting shape that you can create, you can just use that as a basis, and then make it your own in your drawing. We're almost there. How are we doing here? So, yeah. And then looking at skeleton structure. So we've got we've got the bones coming up, and then we've got like knuckles and so on. So make it, we're making our piece interesting by having that. And not everything's uniform. It's like you draw something, then you kind of break the rules and make people guess again, and keep them on their toes to what you're drawing. If you're drawing multiple multiple items within your piece of something, try and change it up a bit more. Keep your piece interesting. Let's just draw one. Yeah, this is where we had it, and this is, I mean, if you wanted to, if it's something's going to be hidden and obscured, you can just duplicate the item, and in some cases that'll work for you. But where you can, draw it uniquely, if you can, let's make it. Let's see, selected everything. So let's expand. Let's draw this in. Right, so we've got our hands. So what we're going to do again, we're going to add a bit. We're going to just make these a little fainter, and add a little layer, and we're going to take away from it because we don't want them necessarily being so harsh, because they're quite thick elements. So let's only we'll use them sparingly as part of our piece. So just decide where we need them. We'll add a bit more where we've taken too much away, and there we go. Doing just taking time. We're good for time. Great. And now we'll do what we've done before. We're just going to take away and just way they interact. Let's make that as same as everything. So we don't want too many thick elements within this. So let's take away from here. Part of our shape. There we go. Right. So now we've got these. We can take away our sketch, turn that off, and start turning on things that we turned off earlier. We've got our flames. So there we are. So that's pretty much like the basis of our sketch. So one of the things I'm going to do here is like another chain or two. Fresh, so I can see my angles again. There we go. So we're getting there. Let's add another chain. So let's select. Let's grab my mouse. Let's select this layer. When you have a lot of layers, you kind of very easy to forget where you are. There you go. Let's select this one. Duplicate this one. And please just make this work interact a little more. Turn off that color, and there we go. It's just that felt like it wasn't working within the overall piece. It was just like too disjointed. So that very, yeah, very easily there. That's what I'm going to do, is make it smaller as well, because it's more in the background. What I'm going to do is select that, and just so it's not the same, we're going to actually, where the chain broke here, we're just going to break that element off. So it's like more of a snap chain sort of effect. But that's, yeah. So I'm happy with that as like the base of our piece. So elements that I would do to, like, make this. I'm turning off my swatch now, and so I'm happy with that as an element. So what you would do now is like add more probably graphical elements to our piece. So one of the things prepped earlier was basically, here's our logo. So this very easy can become a a comic cover or a poster for our piece. So once you're there, you're the fun bit. So I'm gonna, in a sense, save this where it is. Everything is layered up to where I need it to be. So once you have this piece, it's like, okay, great. You sit back and you give yourself half an hour, half a day, and you can come back to it and say, okay, what are the areas I'd fix? But also, what are the other things that I can have fun with at this piece? So one of the things I'd probably end up doing, what you always end up doing, is playing around with color. So I was like thinking, this is something else we could do with the pieces, like add like this shock of pink to it. Instead of having these orange and yellow flames, how about adding this shock of color? And we're working on this white background at the moment, but say if we made it pure black, so all you really have is this kind of this silhouette that we've got of Ghost Rider, and all this like this shock of the Hellfire, which is just kind of like this cone shape, which is coming from within him. So that's a very cool thing. And then if you know the comics, and there's been different people that have been, I guess, blessed or cursed with the spirit of vengeance. So if anyone knows, there's also Danny Danny Ketch. So he's been Ghost Rider before, but his flame is blue. So what I'm going to do is now add basically a gradient map, which basically selects the colors that we have, and then it swaps them out for another set of colors. So here's something I prepped earlier on. In a sense, we can add that, and then we very quickly got a different piece again. And we can either have it with the white background, or we can have it with the black background, which I think for the blues, it works really well for this particular piece. So that's how I would have it. Like, this is like, say if I wanted a variant to my piece, I would go with the Johnny, I would go with Johnny Blaze and have the kind of the original sort of like orange and yellow flame colors. But then I'd do a variant, and I'd have this is my blue version. This is Ketch. So you can turn them off and on, and it's not breaking anything of our piece. You can go back, and this is like the OG. This is our original. So I'm just going to add just a little color effect to it, just so it brings out those reds a bit more, adds a bit more depth to our piece. But that's pretty much that's what we're looking at here. So I'm going to quickly just answer a couple more questions, and leave the piece there for now. I'm just going to zoom in a little so everyone can see it a little better, and quickly just go to our questions. So let me just see if there's any more here. Let's see. A lot there. No. We've done that one already. Yes, that one. My favorite superhero is definitely Spiderman. That one. My favorite superhero is definitely Spiderman. There we go. Here we go. Here's a question. Which superhero do you think is the easiest to draw for beginners? I would say let's think whose is a simple one. What is a simple piece to draw? Like, say if you're starting out, I would pick a superhero which probably had the least amount of intricate, like in a sense, costume, or parts which are hard to draw, detailed parts. So I would pick someone in spandex. Spandex is probably the easiest thing because it's figure hugging, so you can just draw the pattern of the suit on there. Spidey's a cool one. I mean, I know like if you go back to some of the animated shows and so forth, they used to just draw like his webbing just on his face and leave the body plain because it's so hard drawing that again and again, especially when you're working at cells. So I think Spidey's very easy initially, just because you can either just draw the head, you can draw the full body, but you're pretty much drawing, say, Lady Thor. That was a very intricate piece because their armor and so forth is so different from material point of view. You've got the chainmail, you've got the leather items, you've got the chrome elements from the helmet, and so forth, and you got the boots and everything else. So that was probably one of the hardest characters I've had to draw, but probably fun as well. I mean, I love Thor, but that's like the other end of the scale. And another recent one I drew was Silver Surfer. I guess Silver Surfer can be easy to draw depending on the style you can draw in. If you can get your head around how to draw chrome, but even if you don't do that, I would just start off with like say, here's my black background, drawing a bit of like stars and space, and you draw this silhouette in white of this figure. And then just drawing in a few little details. You can build it up slowly over time, but that very much, it's the silhouette that you're looking to create. And whenever you're drawing a character, always like black it out in a sense, map it out, and just look at the silhouette. If the character is identifiable with the silhouette that you're drawing, then he will be, and it'll be an interesting final piece when you fill in all the details. So always kind of go back and look at the silhouette you're creating too. Here's another question. Do I prefer comic covers or posters? Um, it's a different thing. I mean, I guess I started off drawing posters for like movies and galleries and so forth. And because of that, I've gotten to draw comic covers as well because of that. And I love it. It's like the kid in me is like, just pinching himself because I never thought or I never dreamt of that I'd be able to draw, covers directly from Marvel. So I got to pick that off earlier this year. And since then, I recently just finished two covers as well for Marvel. I can say the one that's coming out soon is the next one is in November, and it's going to be it's a variant cover for Marauders issue 15. So keep an eye out on that one. Had a lot of fun drawing that. And the one after that, which I've finished a few weeks ago, I can't actually say because that's for a new property, in a sense, a new series that Marvel is launching for a existing character. I'm trying not to say too much because I know it's very hush hush, but yeah, there's definitely two comics coming out this year that I've worked on. Um, so I say at the moment I'm very much loving doing the comics because it's just going back and I'm appeasing the kid in me that getting to draw comics for the first time. I'm having a lot of fun. But then it's like if I draw the comic, maybe I can turn it into a poster later on. So people that can't pick up the comic or they want that as a full poster piece, maybe I can release them. Work with someone and get them released as a set. So it's a lot of fun. It goes around in circles, but yeah, I'm definitely loving doing comics right now. So the other thing I was saying is, as you can see a lot of what I'm working on. If people are asking, what am I working on next, you can follow me on Instagram where I post a lot of my works in progress. So that's underscore Doaly, or you can follow me on Twitter. I've also got a new Twitch channel as well, which I'll be doing a lot more of these, how to draw. So you can see my process, you can see me getting stuff ready to print. So you can follow me on Doaly Draws there as well. So those are the places to catch me, and I'm always updating that pretty much on a daily basis where I'm working on, whether it's via the stories or whether via the main page. But you can always see what I'm working on what prints and what comics and what films I'm working on a weekly and daily basis. Let me just see if there's any more questions for us. Um, we're getting, I think a lot of them are doubling up and just asking me about my heroes, what software I'm using, um, what inspires me as an artist. I guess it's just that I've always been, you know, ever since a kid, I was always drawing, whether it was just on scraps of paper and so forth. So that was always my release. That was the way I had, I've had fun to create these worlds, create these characters, redraw, characters that I'm watching and reading about. It's just the way I guess my brain's wired that I need to create. It's what the things I say to people is if I wasn't doing this as a job, I would still be doing it because I have so much passion for it to create something. So, and it's how I started off. I started, this whole process by, drawing for fun, and it's become a career outside of that. So I count myself very lucky, and it came about organically. So Yeah. Here's one more question. This probably the last one because I'm just looking at the clock. Um, what first inspired you to be an artist, and are there any certain courses or college programs you studied for art? So I studied graphic design, and then I majored in multimedia design. So that kind of took me into web design, app design, and so forth. But my basis, I guess, prior to that was graphic design. So it is typography, it is logo design, and things like that. So that kind of comes back into my work with my use of type and composition, I think. Um, but while I was studying, I also did photography for a few classes and a few terms. So it's one of the things that I guess that naturally I have an eye for composition, and it's just what avenue or what road that took me on. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things. Like I played around with photography before, kind of came back to illustration because I didn't know where I wanted to pursue that creative outlet, and it just so happened illustration is the one that I stuck with, and I count myself lucky from that point of view. But that's that, guys. But thank you. This has been really lots of fun to draw. So thank you for me like joining me today. It's been so much fun. And like I said, if you want to see more, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch. And I'll hopefully be doing a lot more of these as well. So finally, I'm just going to leave you with this piece which is Ghost Rider, which is the first time I've drawn him. So I'm very gracious, and pleased that I could draw him for you today. Thank you, everyone.
What kind of music do you play at a party and everybody's there to see you off?